Salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. This is Gemini Brett. We are in the midst of a serious eclipse portal, and I hope you are feeling alive. It's a powerful time, which we all know, and I hope that we will make the most of it, all of us. I am currently teaching an AstroMap masterclass for Astrology Hub's Inner Circle, which is a wonderful place to be. I'm really honored to be a guide over there this month. And so I'm playing with maps even more than usual. Well, I don't know if that's possible. But anyway, I kind of want to have an adventure of a daily map. And today we are celebrating a space anniversary of the first woman in space, Sally Ride, who rode on the Challenger shuttle to Earth orbit June 19th, 1983. 37 years ago, she was up there with 5 other astronauts orbiting around on the space shuttle at this time. So it's a nodal return, 37 years. It is a anniversary. So I thought maybe we would tune into Sally Ride's chart a little bit and see maybe what the maps have to say. And so the general play here is always like biography in one hand, right? Chart, maps in the other. I'm going to share with you where I found the birth information that I'm using here, and it was at Astro Databank, which I hope you know about. Such an incredible resource online for we astrologers. So I just searched Sally Ride Astro Databank, and there you go. And we find a Rodin rating, and collected by Rodin herself, birth certificate in hand. This means for a Rodin rating of AA. With AstroMaps, unless you're trying to rectify a birth time with maps, which I would suggest is possible, and I'm not the first to, you really need a good birth time, right? Because what am I doing when I look at an astrocartography map? I'm looking at places where planets in the moment of birth were either rising. So for Sally Ride, Pluto was rising here. I'm interested in seeing another button. Okay, pretty close to Kennedy Space Center, which is right here off the, on Merritt Island at the Florida East Coast by Orlando. So, all right. So these are rising lines. And importantly, Sally Ride was born in Los Angeles where Uranus was rising. All right, so we can see that right here, Uranus on the ascendant. How's that for an astronaut, right? I mean, Uranus rising. Cancer Uranus rising, what does that have to say? And for me, I like to work with the invisible planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, beyond. I mean, Chiron, the centaurs, these kinds of things, by looking at their connections with visible planets, like first and foremost. So with Uranus, we see a really strong sextile, Mercury-Uranus. Now, Mercury's separating from that sextile, but it's alive, that's for sure. The stronger aspect with Uranus is this square from Jupiter, right? Jupiter's applying to perfect this square with Uranus. And when we see that, we might look to also this T-square of Jupiter Chiron in Uranus at the time of Sally Ride's birth. Okay, so that's T squares can be pretty heavy energy. It kind of directs our gaze at the bottom of the chart to Libra. Notice that Jupiter's right at the top of the chart. Now he's not at the midheaven, though traditionally he does rule the midheaven. But there's a point that's square to the ascendant descendant axis. So in this case, 853 Aries, which is actually the highest part of the ecliptic curve. Many people incorrectly teach that to be the truth of the midheaven. The midheaven is the highest point in time. The nonagesmal here is the highest point in space for the ecliptic. So Jupiter, in that sense, is, and actually it's also closest to the midheaven, is the highest planet in Sally Ride's nativity. All right, so we have this Jupiter square Uranus, this Jupiter Chiron Uranus T square, this Mercury Uranus sextile. What else do you see? How about Mars Cazimi in Gemini? Okay, we've got an Aquarius moon. All right, so the scientific mind in beautiful ways there. although Earth sciences, Mercury and Taurus. But the Aquarius moon reflecting Gemini light, I mean, this is the revolutionary traveler, among many other things, kind of cherry picking. But hey, it is there. How does Aquarius reflect Gemini but a revolutionary traveler? And there you go. She was an athlete. She was a great tennis player, I just found out. And so we've got a bit of that kind of athletic Mars Cazimi happening. Now, why do I say Cazimi? That term in the heart of it is typically reserved for planets who are within 1 degree of the sun Hellenistically, and here we have 1 degree and 2 arc minutes, so we're just out of that condition because the sun is separating away from Mars. Close enough, I'll say. Although, in the medieval tradition, it was like you had to be within 17 arc minutes of either side of the sun, and that clearly is not happening here. But, the Mars energy coming through that light, I mean, of course, you have to be in really good shape to be an astronaut, right? So she's an athlete, she's an astronaut. There's a little bit here of that Jupiter square Uranus that's like bring me up to the top of the sky, right? And what else do you notice about this chart? I mean, there's of course endless things to see. We see Moon Pluto, which is, I'm sure the first place a lot of you went when you looked at this nativity. Venus trine, North Node, and therefore sextile South Node. So there's that wedge. I think Saturn right at the IC. It's kind of a powerful statement. So if we look at the astrocartography place chart for her birthplace, here's that Uranus rising line. And LA is where she was born. The rule is if we are to the east or to the right of the line, the planet is in the cadent house. Okay, and what's the cadent house of the ascendant? The 12th house. Whereas if we are west or to the left of a line, the planet is in the angular house. What's the angular house for a rising line? The first house. So we're going to see Venus in the first and Uranus in the 12th, right? Good. Okay, and if we bring in the IC lines, we should see Saturn right there at the bottom, right? So here's the Saturn at the IC line. And looks a little further away than we might expect. But look, it's 3 degrees, right? The Earth is 360 degrees around, yeah, in longitudes, in meridians. So what's 360 over 3? We should all know that. That's a trine. Well, let's just say it's 3 degrees of longitude away. So actually in Astro Gold software, which is what I'm using here, you can see right below Neptune and Venus here, you'll see the lat long. Okay, so if I hover over this Saturn line, and actually for reasons I'm not going to describe, this will be more accurate when I click zodiacal versus in mundo. Tell you about that another time. Okay, we'll see Vegas where that line goes right through there. Has a longitude of 115 degrees west, and then in LA 118 degrees west. 3 degrees, right? So Saturn is 3 degrees from the IC. See how that works? I mean, it's like clearly just like the map, it just maps the thing. I'm really personally devoted to helping folks see the like astronomy on the map, to see the chart on the Earth, to see, right? Therefore, like the Earth relationship with the planets. I love these AstroMaps. And this is all astrocartography. We'll look at another technique in a bit. So Sally Ride, again, like chart in one hand and biography in another. We read, how do you get to space, friends? And the answer is practice. It's also get a good degree. So in her junior year, Rye discovered science. It could go to all these things. A heavy blow when this professor that turned her on to science committed suicide. I mean, as an astrologer, I'd be really interested in looking at timing techniques around 1972. That seems like obviously a very heavy happening and important happening in her life. We're not going to do that today. Ride applied to Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. She stayed for 3 semesters, then transferred to Stanford University because of her California homesickness. Well, that's interesting because I thought I had read over here that she went to school in New York. Um, oh, Swarthmore College. Oh, interesting. Okay, so let's see how Swarthmore in Pennsylvania. Where is Swarthmore in Pennsylvania? In Swarthmore, Pennsylvania. Cool. Well, let's see where that is on a map. All right, so really close to Philly, which is certainly going to show up on the map. Okay. Because these AstroGold maps, they're not going to give me too much detail about locations. But let's see. I'm going to bring in the setting lines. So these right now are the rising lines and the IC lines, first and fourth house. Here's seventh house line. So we see the moon line going to New York. And as I said earlier, being west or left of the line places that in an angular place. So in Pennsylvania, she would have the moon, the Aquarius moon at the descendant. So it's pretty cool. It's a place where you can go meet that Aquarius moon, right? It's relationships. So relationship with that kind of scientific soul that the Aquarius moon can offer. We also see Mercury close by. And let me zoom in over here towards Pennsylvania. So here's Philly. So yeah, moon and Mercury, right? We're 130 miles from that Mercury at the midheaven line. This place is Mercury in the 10th house of the relocated chart for Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, and then the moon in the 7th. So, that's strong energy. What do we say? The two parts of like the mind are Mercury and the moon. And these places, one of the 4 places on Earth where we have crossings of these two energies, is pretty close where she first went to college. I mean, it's closer to, South Carolina, to DC. I'm sure she spent some time in the White House, right? Pretty far from Kennedy Space Center, which is down here. That would be much closer to this crossing of Mercury and Pluto. Let's get back to that. Let's stick with like this education thing because we did read that she transferred from here to Stanford, which is in Palo Alto, California, up in here. And again, I don't have like the resolution to really tune in. I'm very interested in wondering, hey, was that Uranus line? Is Palo Alto to the left or to the right? I mean, it's more strongly configured to Uranus rising than LA is. So let's relocate the chart. I already did Merritt Island. Let's do Palo Alto, California. So here's Sally Ride's nativity. Of course, the same birth time, 8:11 a.m. on May 2651 for Palo Alto as it is in Los Angeles. Same state, same time zone. And now, oh yeah, we do find Uranus is in the first and just right there. And then the node at the top of the chart. So that's a pretty amazing thing, right? Because it is from Stanford that she then was accepted into the astronaut program. In fact, I found just before I started this letter that she wrote in 1977 when at Stanford to NASA, the Institute for Plasma Research, right? To whom it may concern, I am a PhD candidate in astrophysics at Stanford University and am interested in the space shuttle program. Please send me the forms necessary to apply as a mission specialist candidate. Thank you, Sally Ride. June 27th, 1977. I mean, I'm really tempted to go, well, yeah, let's play there. Let's play with at least, well, let's do this. Let's look at her solar return in 1977. She would have been 26 years old, coming on a nodal reversal. So solar return for 1977. And let's do this for her natal position. Libra rising. Oh, look, Venus, Mars conjoined in Aries at the node. Gemini, Jupiter, sextile, Saturn. We'll look at that against her nativity. And there's something about this Venus-Mars node situation. I mean, oh, and look, this is interesting, right? So this happens every 6 or 7 years alternating, that we have a Mercury synodic return. How do you know when it's a Mercury synodic return? Mercury returns during the solar return. So this is a phasis, a phase return of Mercury, and a cycle return of Mercury. That asked me actually to go look at the Mercury cycle to which Sally Ride was born. I think we'll do that next. You know, this is an amazing thing, right? She's a pioneer, Aries, right? This Jupiter up there, I think, matters so much in seeing Jupiter. And I mean, not too close to the sun, but in Gemini at this point. Like, and she's breaking through, right, in something that had been like a man's world, right? I mean, it's like Chuck Yeager and like, you know, it's like that macho image of what an astronaut is. That was, you know, when she was born, it was these test pilots and all that, you know? And it started leaning more towards scientists. Yeah? All right. Anyway, so there's one thing I see in the solar return chart that's fun. You know, a thing we can also do is check out the solar return and look at a map there. Right? Let me make sure I've got my lines in here. Okay, so let's see if there is anything going down. That's interesting, right? Like Florida is just painted. And there's actually a crossing of Mercury and Uranus that's up here higher, right in Baltimore, they cross, okay? But the Saturn, Mercury, and especially the Saturn Uranus crossings are right at Florida. So during her solar return, in this year that she writes a letter to NASA, right? That moment of her solar return features so much planetary energy because, like, if we cast this solar return chart for Orlando, we're going to see Mercury at the descendant. We're going to see Uranus in the 12th house, actually, because to the right of this Uranus rising line, so Cadent house. We're going to see Saturn, like, right at the midheaven. And that's cool, right? Because in her nativity, she has Saturn at the IC. So she's literally writing a letter about going to space, you know, to the authorities. So, oh, astrology. Here's that Venus, Mars, Kazemi. Now, she would end up marrying a cat from Kansas here who she met in the space program. He was a Steve, what's his name? Harley, I think, was a fellow astronaut, right? And they didn't stay married for long because she got together with her true love during their marriage, it sounds like, and we're going to get back to that theme. So, I mean, other things I would look at just quickly, local space lines. I'm going to speak more about these, but from the birthplace for this solar return in 1977 when she wrote the letter to NASA, and I'm wondering if she sent it to Florida, right? She might have been addressing that to Houston. Well, I'm not exactly sure, but she certainly did eventually launch from Kennedy Space Center here. And look, here's that Venus, Mars, the nodes. Amazing. All right. I mean, I'm tempted, and I'm actually going to. I want to do a subsidiary chart and cast this for Palo Alto, California, for this 1977 solar return, where she was at the time, and to see where. Oh, now we lost her nativity. That's okay. To see where the local space lines from Palo Alto lead, because. Well, astrocartography is the same for any location cast. Local space lines will change. So I'm really confused as to why. Why is this in Los Angeles? Okay. Yeah, so the local space lines, and we do see this energy going to Houston. This was at the time of Virgo moon, and that energy, right? This is basically like in the moment of her solar return, okay? Here's the Virgo moon, and which is far enough from the sun. It's a square moon, right? Like we definitely see this during the day. We're not going to see anyone else but the moon and the sun. But if I like, if Sally wrote that letter and said, I want to go to the moon, and like looked at the moon in the sky, she would literally be facing this direction of the moon line, which it goes right down here to like Houston, Corpus Christi, right? We see like the Venus, Mars, descendant lines crossing here. So I mean, I'd really be interested in seeing where that letter went. Did it go to Florida, which was like more highlighted by the local space lines for her solar return in Los Angeles, or did it go to Texas, which is way more highlighted by her local space lines for the solar return in 1977 when she wrote this letter in Palo Alto? Although what I'm seeing is this is not that chart because this says 1951. So this is her relocated chart for Palo Alto. Okay. So different story than the one I was just saying. I was totally off. And yet, if we relocate her chart to Palo Alto, we do see these lines. So this is in the moment of her birth. Is that right? No, this is a 1977 chart I'm looking at. I'm just finding actually some Astro Gold glitches. They're always adding new things, and I beta test for them, so I get to send them this. I mean, so what I'm really interested right now is what chart is this? And I'm sure actually it is this chart for the moment because she doesn't have in her nativity, she has a Virgo Saturn and a Aquarius moon. They definitely would not run together. They're not in conjunction or opposition, which is necessary for local space lines to run together. So this is definitely the map for this solar return moment when Moon and Saturn are close by. Okay. So this is just a little glitchy. I got to get with Astro Gold about that note in my own mind. Okay, so where did that letter go? Well, does this article tell me? By Ride's life partner, Tam. Okay. We're going to look at Tam in a bit. There's some really interesting local space stuff that I saw there. So here they are in 1983. I mean, this literally could have been 37 years ago right now. Sally Ride in space for the first time. She went up on the shuttle again. She went up in 84, but then a flight was canceled due to the Challenger's explosion in 86. She was not on that flight, by the way. Sally Ride died, though she did die pretty young, pancreatic cancer. So, yeah, I don't know that I'm going to find this out, and I don't think I should be taking your time. This could get just massively boring if we do. But I'm really fascinated in knowing whether this letter went to Texas or went to Florida. And that would probably be pretty easy to find out. But I'll do it on my own time. Interesting, 40 words long. 40 is a Venus timing. 40 years is a Venus synodic return. Also, Venus tends to retrograde for 40 days and 40 nights. Let me bring in her birth chart again. I have all these harmonics. Where's your birth chart? Okay, I'm just going to have to edit this relocated chart. Okay. All right, yeah, there was a thing I said before of like, hey, what about what Mercury cycle was she born into? So let's see that. So I've come to begin the Mercury cycles as many do, and Mercury is retrograde conjoined the sun, passing between Earth and sun like a new moon. And it turns out, let's see this, April 24th, 51. So yeah, she actually has the Mercury Cazimi very close to her natal Mercury. So she was born into a Taurus Mercury cycle that was seeded April 24th, 1951. So I'll say she has Taurus mind and Taurus overmind. That's a long story for another time. As long as I'm playing this game, I mean, I see Venus so far from the sun. Venus is, what, 43 degrees from the sun. That's near maximum elongation. Mercury as well, right? And this is a truth. This is a thing Gary Caton taught me, that the Mercury maximum elongations, furthest distance Mercury can get from the sun is 28 degrees. He doesn't do that in every cycle. But as an evening star, and the conjunction between Earth and Sun, the retrograde conjunction, Mercury Cazimi, and the maximum elongation is morning star, and she was born with morning star, Mercury rising before the sun. They're all in the same degrees of the zodiac. So it's very likely that she was born during Mercury maximum elongation because it's so close to this degree. And actually, I want to check in on that. The easiest way for me to do that is that Mercury is at maximum elongation when his speed is equal to that of the sun. So Mercury's speed, 1 degree and 9 arc minutes at the time of her birth, where the sun was moving 57 arc minutes. So Mercury had already picked up more speed than the sun. So it's some days before her birth. Let me just go a week back and we'll see. Here, when does Mercury have that kind of 57 arc minute speed? I'm looking at this daily rate and longitude. That's speed through the zodiac. And it looks like here, 57:18 in the sun on that day, 57:40. So not yet, maybe the next day. Yeah, sometime in those days. So May 22nd, May 23rd. And Sally Ride was born on May 26th. So Mercury very close to that maximum elongation place. That's a big deal. And so why did I get there? Because remember, we were looking at her solar return in 1977, where shortly after she wrote this letter to NASA asking for what she needed to apply to be an astronaut. Cool. Okay. Speaking of Mercury and this Mercury-Uranus trine, I mean, physics, we kind of think of like an Aquarian thing. She was studying astrophysics. That feels very Aquarius, yeah? And again, she does have Taurus, Mercury, and Aquarius moon. We often say the two sides of mind. They're in square signs, but they're not square, are they? That's 80 degrees. That's the binovile. That's said to be a very charismatic and like relational connection. For those of you who have studied harmonics or vibrational astrology, as the great David Cochrane calls it. She operated the robot arm of the space shuttle, like putting satellites out in space, right? I feel there's some of that robot arm in this Mercury-Uranus sextile. That's maybe a stretch, but maybe some of you feel me. I mean, before we move on from the nativity and just be in maps, I mean, we did see in Palo Alto, Uranus comes here into the first. And so I think that's even maybe a more powerful statement of Uranus rising, which really speaks to the truth that she went to space. It's an amazing thing. In Cancer, right, for the country, right? But she is an absolute pioneer, which we can see in this Aries, Jupiter, Uranus square. She was a voice then. But she really is a game changer. And there's a beautiful truth to 77 as well. Let me see if we can bring that solar return chart back in easily. Yeah, first of all, I'll do it for LA. Oh wait, I was thinking of a different year. I'm thinking of the year she went to space. So the thing here to see, I mean, there's many things always in a chart, but Venus, Mars with the node, fascinating, up in her 10th house. And I said this before, but I really feel like she's doing this amazing work to bring, feminine into this workspace that had been like macho man oriented since, right, like the beginning of the space program. So it's a huge deal. It's the first woman in space, y'all. All right, and so the Mercury synodic return, amazing. It'd be cool to find out when she was accepted to the program, when she went over there, etc. It's interesting to see Pluto here at the bottom of the chart too. But let's move instead to when she went to space. Oh, you know, one thing I will do is look in 1977, and Astro Gold really helps me cheat with this. I'm going to look at annual profections. So in 77, she was in a Mercury year. Okay, Virgo profected ascendant. And when did she send this letter? Do we have a date? Month? Oh, June 27, right? So she is in a Venus month of a Mercury year. That's right at the gateway. It might have still been in the Mercury month. So, okay, Mercury months. Now, for one thing, what I'm going to do when I talk profections, when I see she's in a Mercury month, she's in a Virgo month, she's in a third house month, a third sign month, okay? I'm talking whole signs when I talk profections. Some modern astrologers will use Hellenistic annual profections in quadrant house systems like Porphyry, whatever. For me, when I go like Hellenistic, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with the Hellenistic house system, which is whole sign system, right? So the general idea is she is a child of the moon for life. She has the moon in the 8th in Aquarius, opposite Pluto. And there's a lot to say about that. That's probably beyond her experience as an astronaut, you know, and also not. Like that's a scary thing to blast off into space. But there is a lot of fear. There's a lot of challenge here, right? There's a lot of challenge to break away and allow our freak flag to fly, to be in that place of personal power and beautiful will. And there's so much more to say about that, right? So the moon is the lady of the hour marker because Cancer rising, like she's really, you know, this involvement with Pluto by opposition, with Neptune, by trine. Like there's just so much to say, of course, with every chart. I need to try to check myself. The quincunx of moon Venus becomes very interesting as well. So they're all things that I found really interesting. I was like, oh, I wonder what's going on with her, and like love reality and hidden things in her, because there's so much of that in her nativity. The sun in the 12th, the sun Mars combust officially in the 12th. So much to say about every chart. So the idea of perfections is every year when we turn 1 and we enter our second year of life, the ascendant is Leo for the year. And when we turn 2 and we enter our third house. So this is also true in 1977. She turned 26 years old because every 12 gets me back to the first. So 24 years old, 25, 26 years old is a third house year of travel, of communication, but it's ruled by Mercury. Okay, Mercury, who's in Taurus in her 11th. So we have themes around communication, travel, siblings, many other, you know, third house things, but also around 11th house things, community, friends, groups, these things. She's applying literally to a group, but for a new job. But importantly, I'm a fan of actually turning the wheel when I do annual perfection work. So Astro Gold has this thing for sun sign horoscope writers, which is super helpful for this. Her natal chart is Cancer rising. So this is her chart for life, moon for life, Sally Ride. But when she turned 1 for the year, she has Leo rising. The sun is the time lord. So we see the sun in the 12th of her nativity, but I like to turn the wheel, and the sun in Gemini is in the 11th of Leo. Now I can see that in a chart. I mean, I can see that in a Porphyry chart. We should all learn to, astrologers. But you know, it's important to say, well, when she's in a second house year, Leo, it's not just second and 12th house themes because that's where the sun lives. It's also 11th house themes because the sun is 11 signs from the second. Okay, so when she's in a Virgo year, here she was when she was 26 and she wrote this letter. Mercury, who is in her natal 11th house of groups and such, is in the 9th of the third. So we have these third short distance travel and ninth, the ruler of the third in the ninth of the third. Okay, long distance travel. You think going to space is short or long? I'm gonna go long distance travel on that one. Super mercurial year, house of spirit. And spirit was a huge part of Sally Ride's life. Her brother, I read at Wikipedia, I guess I should use the right term. Let's go to personal life. No, somewhere I read that her brother was a minister and that her parents were like elders in the church. I guess that would be early life. She was the older child. She had one sibling who was a Presbyterian minister. Both parents were elders in the Presbyterian church. Um, Norwegian descent, as long as we get that thing, let's use the map and head over. What's going on here now? Let's go head over to Norway. And not seeing much. Neptune. This would be Neptune in the 12th house. Okay. But always fun to go and see. All right, so where do we see those elders in the church? And for me, it's just easier to point this out in a porphyry chart that we can see it because Saturn's opposite the midheaven in that whole sign chart, but Saturn's right at the IC. So that's a lot of weight in the home and authority and rules. And Saturn in Virgo, there's a lot of like, this is the way to pray and that. So I'm not saying she didn't get down with that kind of Presbyterian family tradition. I don't know. But I would say that there's some weight there. And I'm going to project a shitload here because I see that in her biography that she was married to this guy, Stephen Hawley, who was a fellow astronaut for 5 years. And it'd be interesting to look into those dates, of course. But we also see that her life partner was Tam, who was a professional tennis player, actually. And that, look, their partnership started in 1985, so started during this marriage. And that Sally Ride never came out, that this was revealed. I read this in personal life here. It was revealed in her obituary. Right, so after Ride's death, her obituary revealed that her partner of 27 years was Tam. Okay. San Diego University, childhood friend. But then I also looked into Tam. Isn't this a link? And we find that she is born in San Andreas, California. Okay, so I looked there. It's over here east of Stockton, southeast of Sacramento. And that her husband was born, so Stephen Hawley was born in Ottawa, Canada, which is over here close to the border near Kansas City, near Lawrence, where the University of Kansas is. It's a fun town, actually. All right, so check this out in the local space thing. And I'm actually going to take these astrocartography lines away and just show you local space. So again, simply spoken, what local space is here's Sally Ride's birth chart. Here's the sun in the east having risen. If I held baby Sally up to the sun, I wouldn't see that I was also holding her up to Mars, but I would be holding her in a very specific direction towards the east and towards the northeast, actually. Barely, it's almost due east. Here's the Sun-Mars lines. Well, they head over towards Florida. I mean, they don't go right there. That's pretty far from Orlando. It's 333 miles. I'm not going to sleep on that, though. We see Mercury going down towards Houston, where, the mission control is, right? That's 250 miles away. But interestingly, here's Chiron going very close to the birthplace of her husband, which is up here by Kansas City. So that's 75 miles away. And then dig this Jupiter line. It goes right through San Andreas. I mean, if we could get more resolution, and actually at astro.com, they're using a map that I can zoom in much further with, which is nice, but this goes right through that place, I think you can see. Okay, so what? I'm also interested in seeing where the Uranus line goes, which is up here, Chicago, Detroit, Boston, like a lot of Africa. Everything will go to the Antipodes, the opposite side of the globe from where we were born. And then Uranus comes back through Australia and then back to California. I don't know that I'm getting anything from that at all. Um, but to stick with this, Chiron through husband's birthplace and Jupiter through her life partner, Tam's birthplace, I think we see this in the natal chart, right? So the relationship aspect, the axis is the first and the seventh. So Cancer, Capricorn. We see this really strong T square. I mean, Chiron's obviously less involved geometrically speaking than the Jupiter Uranus square is like the strongest aspect of her nativity. I mean, even stronger than the Sun Mars conjunction. Um, and Chiron is involved here. And there's like this kind of hidden things 12th house sun, hidden Mars. That can be hidden attraction, right? Why do I get to this when I'm speaking about Saturn in Virgo at the bottom of the chart? Do you think it's easier or harder to come out when you've got elder Presbyterian parents and a brother who's going to be a minister? I mean, I'm obviously projecting. I have no idea how that was in Sally Ride's life. I do know that she didn't come out publicly while she was alive. We read that this happened in her obituary. You can read about her life with Tam. They made 6 children's books together. Tam started the Sally Ride Science, I don't know the proper name, institution or whatever. Like, it sounds like they had a good thing, but it was never made public. I mean, obviously in the 1980s when Sally Ride was in space, there was much less acceptance, and not that there's enough acceptance now, right? So do what you will with that. There's something about Uranus rising too. And so Chiron, like the wounds, right? And also the medicine. But in Capricorn, right? There's like the wounds of the traditions that won't let me be Uranian. That won't let me do family and love the way that Venus Cancer maybe wants to, right? And this thing is stationed for a breakout. And where does the cardinal T-square of Aries, Cancer, Capricorn point? But to Libra, to relations, to the bottom of the chart, yeah? So, and I think this moon Pluto, as I was alluding to earlier, and the inconjuncts of Venus Pluto and Venus moon, and then how Neptune can see them all. Neptune square, or Venus square Neptune. Which, maybe that's actually the strongest aspect of her chart, isn't it? Right? So Uranus rising, Venus square Neptune. There's a lot of images here of releasing herself from the norms of like traditional relationship, right? And we see that local space line of Chiron going to the place where she married a guy. Maybe she loved him. Maybe she was attracted to him. I have no idea. I can only project. This is why it's dangerous to play with people's other than my charts, other than my own, unless I'm sitting with them. And even then, and even with my own chart, how often do I tell myself the truth? Anyway, we see that Chiron line going to the husband's birthplace. And then the Jupiter line, who is the visible one of these, and so visible, I mean, not because the sun, right? But at the height of the chart, Aries pioneering, breaking through. We see so much of that in her like life and expression. I love that. All right. So good. Let's go to Florida. I want to relocate her chart for what am I doing? To Merritt Island, Florida. This is where Kennedy Space Center is. And we find that she's Leo rising. That places the Gemini Mars Cazimi in the whole sign 11th. We see Mars slipping into the Porphyry house system 10th, which is interesting because she did blast off to space from there. We see Mercury who, if anything, is the god of shuttles. That's your guy. I mean, Mars is going to rule the fuel, right? Uranus has something to do, and Mercury sextile Uranus is huge, right? But Mercury up there at the top of the chart, like you say, yes. Now, he's not right up at the top of the chart, so the astrocartography map is not going to show Mercury line moving through Florida. Like he's pretty far away, right? How far away is he? Well, look at the chart. 237 and Mercury's 7 degrees away. And so we're going to find 7 degrees of longitude away. Like the longitude where Mercury is like 72 west. And over here, Florida, it's like 79 with 7 degrees, right? And that's 7 degrees of Earth, right? Like in circumference is we find here about 441 miles. Like I'm not sleeping on that. Personally, I'm going to say that's alive. And even this crossing of Mercury and Pluto, right? So we're west of these lines. We're going to find Mercury in the 10th. We're going to find Pluto in this is the Pluto rising line in the 1st. We're going to find the moon in the 7th of this relocated chart. There you go. Pluto in the 1st, moon in the 7th. One of the strongest, aspects of her chart, I would say energetically, is this moon-Pluto opposition. We find Mercury up there at the 10th. And there's a Mercury-Pluto crossing. Granted it's a bit higher, but as the Earth spun, not for long, like Florida would have moved right through that crossing. And it's a little bit north of Kennedy Space Center, but not that far, okay? So I'm super interested in that. Then I'm interested in saying, oh, okay, well, what is their aspect? Mercury-Pluto, square, right? But not square, right? It is square. It's 98 degrees. So if you know how to play with harmonics, we can just say, all right, well, what's a circle? 360 over 98, and the answer is 3.66. Well, okay, well, but 0.66 is 2/3. So if I multiply this by 3, I'm going to get 11 almost perfectly. And that means, I mean, first of all, it's not perfectly 98 degrees because 46 minutes and 34 minutes. So it's going to be off a bit. But if I cast a 11th harmonic chart for Sally Ride's nativity, we're going to find that Mercury and Pluto are conjoined. And it turns out Mercury, Jupiter, Pluto, and Mars, Sun, and Venus, Chiron. So the 11th harmonic is showing up for her. And I know some of you haven't gotten into harmonic and vibrational astrology, and that just all sounds nuts. Fine. Go study with David Cochran, okay? This is Cochran's wonderful and free, by the way, First 32 Harmonics, a qualitative research. You can find this at David's site. I'm so embarrassed to not know where to send you. Cosmic Patterns Software, okay? But let's just look for the 11th harmonic quickly. I've got a session in 7 minutes. I've got to get into fast forward here. And we'll find some quick notes about the 11th harmonic from Mr. Cochran. The 11th harmonic shows pure imagination and fantasy marks. Seymour Smith says 11th harmonic aspects manifest in a very definitive way and they indicate excess. They also, according to Williamson, describe a person's ability to integrate diversities and dualisms, right? So, I mean, projecting, but being under the closet, like in the closet, in this like professional, very public thing. First woman in space, and yet I can't reveal that I'm attracted to women, Anyway, so they also, according to Williamson, describe a person's ability to integrate diversities and dualisms. These interpretations are reconcilable. The tension of double bind situations, which can be external, where you are trapped by feelings of obligation or duty, but cannot entirely please one or more people, or internal, the tug between skepticism and faith, is likely to lead a type of stretch, which in its turn will lead to excess in one form or another. Now, I don't know if her Presbyterian elder parents promoted that rap that homosexuality is sin. and needs to be repented. I'd be like, I would project and assume that. So can you like just think of how this sits? Mercury, Pluto, the moon is tied in. Jupiter, who is such a release point, is tied in, right? So we see, how do we get 11th harmonic from Jupiter and Mercury? They're 32 degrees apart. When we divide 360 circle by 32, you find that 11, right? So that's why we found Mercury, Pluto and Jupiter all huddled together. The Venus, the Chiron. I mean, that was a really amazing chart. And I'm projecting a ton. How can I not? But it's pretty interesting for me to think of, what would it be like to have to hide who I really am as a public figure, which is a huge thing here. I mean, she's a hero to girls and women, and how many people would just discredit her if she chose to be who she truly was? How many people would credit her? Anyway, so let's bring some love and some light to that. So we read also, that was from Linda Goodman's forum, and here's a URL. The 111th aspect indicates the ability to reach beyond oneself for help and to have a strong social consciousness. Social consciousness, I have to look this way, right, to be this first woman in space. All right, anyway. The 11th harmonic is unstable, Uranian, and hungry for something new and innovative and impatient and inclined to music and dancing. Is going to space new and innovative? Yes. Getting enough sleep and avoiding too many stimulants is important, says David Cochran. How about the stimulant, sir, of sitting on a rocket ship, Okay. All right, so the last thing I want to do is look to the transit chart. I might already have it up here because I was looking at it earlier, or we might just have to cast it. Let's just cast it. New chart. So Sally Ride to space. And the day was June 19th, 1983. Happy space anniversary, Sally Ride. I'm just going to write 12 p.m. I have no idea when, from Merritt Island. Okay. And we see what happened there. Oh, interesting. Well, I've got her Merritt Island relocation for the first. That's actually fine, because let's look at these transits in respect to her relocated angles. First of all, there's a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. The moon's coming in. I mean, it might have been Moon, Saturn, Pluto. The sun is within the node, with the node. What's that mean? Eclipse, y'all. At her solar return, shortly before this, the sun was with Mars, because that happens for everyone at 32 years old. So does the Venus synodic return. Well, she has Venus so far from the sun. This is like Venus as queen, okay? And at the time of this blast off, Venus was transiting her Leo relocated ascendant. I think the last thing that I want to do, or I want to do so much more, but the last thing I have time to do is to show you in her profections at the time. But first of all, if you studied zodiacal releasing, this is an amazing thing. There's a loosening of the bonds in January of 84. And then you can dig into what was going down on this level at the time of the launch too. It's pretty amazing to see. I'm looking at Fideria. She just came into her moon zone. In her annual profections in June of 1983, we're in a Jupiter year, okay? A Pisces year, a ninth house year, the year of long distance travel with Jupiter, the ruler of the ninth, in the sign of Aries. And so let's look at the solar return chart for 1983. And see what's alive with Jupiter. Well, he's conjoined Uranus in Sagittarius. Astrology! I just so y'all can investigate. This is Sally Ride's solar return in 1983 when she went to space. Check out her north node. Her ninth house north node was rising in LA, her birthplace for the solar return chart. A Scorpio moon, the Jupiter, Uranus, Sun, Mars, and this is the Mars synodic return, the Venus synodic return. So not surprising. The least surprising thing is I went a lot longer than I thought I would. I think maybe I'll try to do a little written summary of some of these things. AstroMaps, always amazing. I'm available for astrolocality and astromapping sessions if you want to play with your map in space. GeminiBrett.com. I'm teaching AstroMaps for Astrology Hub's Inner Circle like this month right now and doing forecasts and much more. So if you want to get down with that, I will put a link in the comments below. Thanks for being here and spending some time with me. I will see you in space with Sally Ride.